The Man Who Wasn't There is a movie that, if you don't know about it, that's fine. Not a lot of people know about this movie. This is an incredibly underrated film from master directors Joel and Ethan Coen, or better known as the Coen Brothers. This is a movie from 2001, and it deserves more recognition.
Now, being a barber is a lot like being a barman or a soda jerk. There's not much to it once you've learned the basic moves. For the kids, there's the butch or the hiney, the flat top, the ivy, the crew, the vanguard, the junior contour, and occasionally the executive contour.
This is a movie that reminds me a lot of their other work for obvious reasons, but specifically it reminds me of A Serious Man, which is a movie I've already done a video about, and is a movie I think is a little bit better than this movie. But this movie, I think, has so much to it that is worth watching, worth checking it out for. It seems like this movie constantly flies under the radar when people talk about the best Coen Brothers movies. You get Fargo brought up, you get No Country for Old Men brought up, you get A Serious Man brought up if you're me, and rarely do I ever see people talking about The Man Who Wasn't There, and yet it is one of their best movies. I don't know if it would be top 5 for me, but it would definitely be close. It is absolutely brilliant and borderline genius level work. I mean, I love A Serious Man, I love No Country for Old Men, I love Fargo, and this one comes really close to being on that level. And No Country for Old Men is one of the most revered movies of all time. And mainly, that has to do with the fact that it is so human. This story that it tells is such a human story, much like A Serious Man, which is about a Jewish professor that his life gets ruined through events that seem out of his control. And that's what that whole movie is about. Just his life spiraling out of control. And it's kind of commenting on how life takes you through whirlwind after whirlwind, whether you like it or not, whether you think you're doing anything or not. It's just, you know, happenstance. It's chaos. The world is chaos is essentially what I get out of A Serious Man. However, The Man Who Wasn't There is similar and yet vastly different, because again, Serious Man is about a man whose life spirals out of control. The Man Who Wasn't Theirs, that movie is about a man's life that spirals out of control. They're both very similar in structure, they're both very similar in tone, they're both very similar in story, but what both of them are tackling is vastly different, and the way that it executes its material is vastly different.
When I walked home, it seemed like everyone avoided looking at me, as if I'd caught some disease. This thing with Doris, nobody wanted to talk about it. It was like I was a ghost walking down the street.
The main story of The Man Who Wasn't There is about Billy Bob Thornton, who plays Ed, who is a barber at a barbershop. He's second chair to his brother-in-law. And he has a pretty normal life. He lives with his wife, who's played by Frances McDormand. They have an average house, they live in an average neighborhood, and his wife is about to be up for a promotion at this retail store that she's working at with one of their neighbors, Big Dave, and his wife, who owns the retail store. Nerdlingers is what it's called, which is a hilarious name. Where you get the conflict is when Ed, Billy Bob Thornton, believes that Frances McDormand is cheating on him with Big Dave. And just around that time when he kind of thinks that she's cheating on him, a dry cleaning guy who wants to start dry cleaning and invest in it because it's not a technology that's prevalent at the time, he comes to town and he convinces Billy Bob Thornton to give him money to invest in dry cleaning. And he doesn't have $10,000 to give this man, so he decides to blackmail Big Dave into getting 10 grand from him, saying that, I know that you're having an affair, give me the money and I won't tell anybody. And that's the setup. That's the setup to this whole story. And then it just spirals out of control. It escalates to a level where you think that nothing more can be taken away from this character, and it has another 45 minutes. It is an absolute miserable nightmare, and that is what I love about it. It's so dark. Because it's a Coen Brothers movie, it isn't like depressing, it isn't soul-crushing like a movie for example, like Requiem for a Dream was. That movie is absolutely soul-crushing. But this movie has spurts of lighthearted comedy that the Coen Brothers are known for, specifically in their side characters.
Now, interview. I'm seeing her tomorrow. You should be there, 3 o'clock. One more thing. You keep your mouth shut. I get the lay of the land. I tell you what to say. No talking out of school. What's out of school? Everything's out of school. I do the talking. You keep your trap shut. I'm an attorney. You're a barber. You don't know anything.
Okay.
There are so many characters in this movie, and every single one of them is memorable in one way or another. Every single character has their very unique charm or memorable quality to them. Every single character is played like a real human being, and they're relatable because of that. They're not personally relatable, but I believe there is at least one character in this movie that every single person on planet Earth can relate to or know somebody like that. Even though it's a period piece set in like the 50s or 60s, I can't remember. Watching this movie for a second time, seeing all these characters again, seeing this lawyer of Francis McDormand and Billy Bob Thornton and how he interacts with them, and his private investigator that he brings in. Everyone has their own charm to them. And that's what makes this movie so rewatchable for me. Even though it is much more sad than the normal Coen Brothers movie, it just has so many likable characters. And without that, I'm not sure that this movie would work as well as it does, because again, the main point of the story is to tell a human story, but it is a very slow moving story. And without these unique characters populating the movie, I'm not convinced that this slow burn would be worth it. Again, the Coen Brothers are masters of writing, masters of directing. I've already covered their writing and their directing extensively on this channel, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. But what they do with this tone and how slow and methodical it is, and how it lets you just absorb the world and the characters that are in it, is borderline ingenious. Again, it is incredibly slow. You have scenes that go on, it feels like far too long. You have a scene with Richard Jenkins, who is playing Scarlett Johansson's father, and there's one scene where he's drunk on the porch, just burping through lines of dialogue, and it is the best scene ever.
There's nobody around here has any experience with this kind of thing. I hear they're bringing a prosecutor up from Sacramento. No, the best, the money is no object best, any lawyer will tell you, is Freddie Riedenschneider from Sacramento.
But in any other movie, you have a scene like that and you would say this is going on too long. But the writing, the directing, and the character works, plus the performances, it makes it so watchable and so much fun. But I should talk about these characters, Richard Jenkins and specifically Scarlett Johansson, Birdie. I do have to talk about Birdie, and I have to talk about aliens, which is a interesting transition because they're a huge part of this movie. And both of these things come down to the thematics of the movie, which I think is the best part of it. I love the messaging of this movie, and I think it is one of those movies that you come out of it just in deep thought about. It puts me in a state of pondering for at least an hour after I watch it every time. It makes me think about the world. It makes me think about my personal life. It makes me think about everyday life. And the big reason for that is because the movie seems to be saying that because of this decision to get this money to blackmail Big Dave, his whole life is ruined. And not only his life, but every single person around him, their life is also ruined. You've got Birdie, who ends up in a car accident with a broken collarbone. You've got his wife, who ends up in jail and hangs herself. You've got him, who ends up on the electric chair on death row after everyone around him is basically disowned him. Their lives are ruined not because of him specifically doing something to him, but just by association, really. There's a point near the end when he's walking through the streets saying,
"When I walked home, it seemed like everyone avoided looking at me, as if I'd caught some disease."
A little bit before that is when the aliens come in, and I keep mentioning them, But the aliens play a big role in this movie, even though they're only brought up, I believe, 3 times. Once by Big Dave's wife, who believes that Big Dave was abducted by aliens, and after which he wouldn't get intimate with her, which means that the aliens made him impotent. The aliens are responsible for their lack of intimacy, when in actuality, the more likely answer is that he's just not attracted to her, and that point is cemented by him being unfaithful, having an affair with somebody. And the last time we see aliens is when you literally see aliens. A spaceship descends over the prison that Billy Bob Thornton is at, and he looks straight at it. And this seems to be commenting on man's inability or fear of fixing their issues and having to blame it on some external extraterrestrial force. Your partner is not attracted to you. These aliens have nothing to do with it. And then at the very end, when the aliens appear, is when Billy Bob Thornton is on death row. His cell is opened, there's no guards. By seeing this alien spaceship walking back into a cell, not mentioning it, and then going back into a cell and then going to death row the next day, it makes me really question whether or not some people are really dealing with their issues, and it makes me question whether or not I'm dealing with my issues in a healthy way, or if I'm blaming an external force that has nothing to do with it. And to me, that is one of the most compelling aspects of the movie, and what makes me really sit in deep thought, reminiscing on my life, reminiscing on life in general, and whether or not I have caused issues with people or with myself that could have been easily averted just by me fixing an issue.
His name is Jacques Carcinogus. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it right. Anyway, a Frenchman.
Oh boy, Frenchman, huh?
You've got talent. Anybody can see that. And he's the best. If he sees a student that he thinks has talent, he takes them on for next to nothing. So you're a cinch to be accepted.
Now, again, I mentioned Birdie. I didn't quite talk about what she seems to be saying for me. She is probably the most important character in the movie when trying to understand Ed as a character, because she seems to be representing innocence, or the loss of innocence, in Ed's eyes. Because after he loses his wife and basically loses everything, he takes a serious interest in her and in her piano playing abilities, even going so far as to paying for a consultation with a incredibly prestigious French piano master, teacher. And he pays for this lesson, and the teacher says, she sucks, I don't want to see her.
Yeah, I really do appreciate the interest you've taken. I just wanted to make you happy.
Birdie?
No, it's really okay. I want to do it.
Birdie.
No, it's okay, really.
No.
Mr. Crane, I
No.
want to do it. Mr.
No.
Crane!
Birdie, please
Mr.
don't
Crane,
do that.
Please!
And then he gets in a car accident as she goes and tries to pull his pants down in an incredibly awkward and uncomfortable scene. And she breaks her collarbone and you never see her again. So to me, that rings of this loss of innocence in Ed, and how he wants to protect her innocence. He's trying so hard to protect her from the world and give her a head start, and he just ends up ruining it. He ends up ruining her, even though you are trying to help and you have no malintent whatsoever, which Ed doesn't. He did too much. He helped too much to the point where it ended up negatively affecting somebody. So that's an incredibly interesting concept and idea to dwell on. When should you take a step back? When should you invest in yourself and less in somebody else who may not even want it? So
I don't know what I'll find beyond the earth and sky, but I'm not afraid to go. Maybe the things I don't understand will be clearer there, like when a fog blows away. Maybe Doris will be there.